Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Yanina Doyle, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine lovers, and welcome back to a few days-ish after Beaujolais Nouveau Day. So Beaujolais Nouveau Day is always the third Thursday of November, and this year it was just on the 16th of November. Now, I hope you have grabbed yourself a bottle of Beaujolais Nouveau because in this episode, we're going to look at the tradition, the history, what it is, what it tastes like, how to serve it. And I am talking with Dan, the owner of Wickhams Wines, which, if you've been listening this season, you will know are my absolutely fantastic sponsor. And I love the fact that finally you're going to be able to listen to Dan himself and you will realize how incredible he is. So enough of me chatting. Pour yourself that glass and enjoy the episode. Okay, so Dan, are you feeling nervous? You have been an avid listener for how many years now?
Since the beginning. I've actually listened.
Oh,
I've actually listened to the very earliest episodes. Yes.
Which we don't
talk about.
We don't talk about those episodes. No. As someone who has actually listened to those original episodes where I had a co-host, would you advise anyone to go back that far?
No, never work with animals or children.
Oof, oh, harsh. Anyway, right. I am so moving on. We can't carry on here. I am so excited to have you here because, of course, we're such wonderful friends. Are we wonderful friends? I was just about to say that. I mean, do you agree?
I'll let you say that. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, that'll do.
I feel as though we have a bond of friendship.
I concur. But after working together, knowing each other, it's been so amazing that considering you actually enjoy this podcast, that you've sponsored it this year. And what's been brilliant as well is I'm mentioning it, but you now actually get to you're in the hot seat. So it's really nice because it's me saying, look, these wines that Dan brings in are great, but do people believe me? I don't know. So now the pressure's on you. To prove yourself, these people are listening. So I need to hand this over to you to show your incredible knowledge. Are you going to let us down?
I apologise in advance to all of the listeners. There is a great expectation from the wonderful guests that you've had on in the past, and now they're going to be subjected to me. No,
I am so excited because, as you know, many people don't realise that when Dan and I have any normal conversation, the normal conversation, which might for any other person take 5 minutes, takes us an hour, doesn't it?
I have to put time in my diary to phone Yanina. So I have to block out 2 hours. I can't just we can't just be a quick phone call. It's like, right, I need to speak to Yanina. Right, yeah, Friday afternoon, I've got 2 hours free.
Finally, let's make the phone call. Honestly. Right, okay. I'm sure people are like, okay, we get it. You two talk a lot. Well, okay, but we're going to talk about wine now. So I actually don't know this answer. So I'm intrigued as well. I want you to explain how you even got into the wine industry. I mean, did you grow up drinking some wine?
Yeah, in my bottle. So from a very young age.
Beautiful baby bottle.
Yeah.
Love it.
Started with that. Actually, I'm going to digress very, very briefly. I do have a funny story about
I'm
that.
not surprised.
We're talking about Beaujolais today, although we'll probably come on to that a little bit later. And one of the producers that we work with, Dominic, he did actually tell me, so genuinely, he used to be the president of Vin de Beaujolais, very, very influential man in Beaujolais, 72 years old now. When he was a child, he actually was given wine and water at school at lunchtime for his drink until it was banned in France in 1956. So he would be given Morgon with water.
Well, first of all, there's a part of me like, oh my God, wow. But then also I'm like, they watered down the wine, right? Just seems...
I love the fact that most people are going, oh my God, they were giving children alcohol. And you're going, they weren't giving them the full strength alcohol. like what? Poor
just
children.
Seems a waste. Oh, if only I lived in the 1950s. Okay, well, obviously you didn't. Jokes aside, you sadly were not even given any watered down Morgon.
Sadly not, no. No, so actually I started off in catering. So that was where it all started. So I used to be a chef a long, long time ago. And my mother and I had an outside catering company where we do weddings and christenings and all that sort of thing. And we did some sort of society weddings, if you like, in marquees with some, you know, some interesting people. And there was one particular wedding that we catered, and all of the wines for the wedding came from a very well-known wine merchant in England, the oldest wine merchant in England. And at the end of...
Which is
Berry Brothers and Rudd.
Is that Berry Bros? Yeah. Okay, good. Good. It already came out of my mouth, but I was like, oh, God, am I supposed to know? Yeah, good. I proved it.
Well done. And so at the end of the wedding, to sort of say thank you very much for job well done, we were given a case of champagne. And it was Berry Brothers' own champagne, produced by May. And we took that home, thought nothing much of it, really. Case of champagne, nice, popped a couple in the fridge. Open one, and it was that taste that I got. It was this sort of incredible, linear, clean, green, crunchy apple fruit flavour that I'd never tasted in anything else before. And I was like, wow, this is phenomenal. I need to know more about this. And that's where it started. Okay. That's where the sort of interest. That's the interest that sort of piqued my interest. That's the moment that piqued my interest. And I was like, I need to learn more about this. And so my journey began.
I love that. And then, of course, that's taken you to setting up Wickham's Wine. Now, I genuinely, it's brilliant because from knowing you for long enough, I actually get to slowly work my way through all your wines, which is brilliant. It's amazing because there's no duds. It's so good that every time I taste a bottle, I'm always excited. And I think that's because of your passion and you're importing so many of these wines yourself. Somebody comes to your site or goes online anyway and they're like, I want to buy wine. You don't have a wine merchant. You don't have somebody saying, hey, what's your flavor profile? So I'm just, for somebody who wants to buy wine, considering you've put all the effort in putting those wines online, effectively creating a list, what should somebody be doing to try and help them pick a right bottle? I'm wondering, you're on the other side. Does that help you?
I think, yeah. So I think that's down to us to sort of how we structure the site, the information we put on there, how easy we find, for you to find wines that are similar to link through, so whether that be wines by the same producer, wines by the same, that are made from the same grape or from the same region, or whether it's wines that are a similar profile. So that's partly us making sure that the navigation of the site works really well. And then I think also, so the good thing about internet is that it's convenient. So you can sit at home, you can flick through our list, you can find wines that you like, you can add them to your basket. But then equally, what we try and do is make sure that you're doing that with as little risk as possible. So we do the 100% satisfaction guarantee. If you're not happy, you can always send back the wine. We'll replace it. We'll refund it. We're confident. I'm confident that the wines that we've got are good. But if there's any reason why people don't like it, well, then just tell us and we'll give you another bottle. So you have that confidence to sort of take that leap. Because, if you go into a traditional wine merchant, then there's someone there that you can chat to and you can tell them, oh, I like X, Y, and Z, and they'll find something that's similar. Whereas obviously we don't have that. You can phone us up. You can chat to the lovely people on the end of the phone and they can give you some advice.
You have real people?
We have real people answering the telephone, not even robots. It's like proper real people sitting, just waiting to speak to customers.
I'm actually genuinely impressed. I mean that. Nobody has real people anymore. Wow. Okay, question. Could somebody be fortunate enough to get you on the end of the phone?
I'm shaking my head now, and I know this is the radio, so shaking your head doesn't work. Very, very rarely. Because I'm generally, as you know, sort of travelling, tasting, meeting people.
No, you're not. You're normally talking to me.
or talking to you. This is the problem. If you try to get through to me, I will be engaged because I will be talking to you, Nina, and you'll be waiting for hours for me to hang up. So no, okay. You normally talk to the lovely Tracy or Laura, who will then help you out.
I love that. Okay. No, do you know what? That's actually, I love the fact, and I forgot that you do actually give 100% confidence guarantee, and that is actually important. So, okay. Now, let's go to Beaujolais. This is what this episode is about. So, obviously, you had your wow moment with a champagne, but Beaujolais, I know, has a very, very special place in your heart. So, why?
So just following on from the story. So that first wine that I tried was from Berry Brothers and Rudd. Berry Brothers and Rudd If you start to, that's where my education, my excitement started. And so I was like, right, I need to learn more about this. I need to find more. And so the first place I went was, of course, Berry Brothers and Rudd. And back then, I don't even think there was a website. This is probably pre-internet, and I used to go into the shop in St. James, where they had this great big ledger with everything written in, and all the wines used to be stored in the cellars underneath St. James. And you'd have your own reserve, and you could go down and look at your own reserve. It's far less romantic now. They're all in a warehouse in Basingstoke. But they're very much focused on those traditional regions, Bordeaux, Burgundy. And that's what a lot of their conversation at that time, certainly, may have moved on now, but that, would be about those very serious places. I've bought wines in Bordeaux and in Burgundy. And you go to Burgundy and you go to a producer in Burgundy, and they'll take you into their cellar or their tasting room, and they'll taste their range of wines with you. So brilliant, right? That one, I love that one. Can I buy this wine? And you can't, it's so hard. They're so serious. They're so, they're so proper, and they've got very little production, and they've got these very long relationships that go back probably hundreds of years in some instances. It's really hard to buy. Go to Beaujolais. The thing I love about Beaujolais is it's much more like me. It's much more light-hearted. It's much more easygoing. There's a charm to it. The winemakers in Beaujolais, they welcome you with open arms. They want you to drink their wines. They want you to buy their wines. They want you to enjoy their wines. It's much more fun. It's much less serious. It's much more easygoing, and it suits me, I think.
I love that. Now, okay, so this specific episode, because we've just gone past Beaujolais Nouveau Day. Yay! Yeah, you need to make noise. Okay, I need to give you some education. I know I can see you, others can't see you. So yeah, exactly. Okay, right. He's dancing around in front of the camera, everyone, but he doesn't really go. Okay, stop dancing. You have to make noise to make it apparent. Okay. Anyway, so we've just gone past Beaujolais Nouveau Day. I have a bottle of Nouveau. There are some much more serious wines in Beaujolais, but Nouveau is the funnest, is the most exciting, easiest, lively wine of them all. So I'm going to hand over to you to explain to people what is Beaujolais Nouveau and what is Beaujolais Nouveau Day? When was it?
Yeah, so starting with Nouveau wines. So Nouveau wines, essentially, or Vin de Primeur, which means the first wine. And it's not just Beaujolais. They make wines of this style in other places as well. And it's about the speed from the harvest, vinification to bottle and out to the customer. So these wines were all picked this year. So the harvest happened this year in September. And then it's roughly 6 weeks from those wines being picked, going into fermentation, being bottled and out to the customer. So 6 weeks, really, really quick. So it's very light, it's very fresh, it's very fruity. And, you also get a similar style of wine made in Bodolino Novello, which is Italian, which they do this very fast wine in a very similar way. Even in England, actually, we have a few producers. So Sharpham are making their new release wine, which is the same principle, where it's very fast. It's not unique to Beaujolais, but Beaujolais is probably the best known. And it goes back, actually. So there was a festival, St. Martin's Day Festival, which happens on the 11th of November, so historic, sort of Saints' Day. And that was a celebration of the harvest. And so there was always so winemakers all over the world, great, vineyards all over the world, would make a wine to drink on St. Martin's Festival to celebrate the end of the harvest. And then it was in 1956, so relatively recently, where actually Beaujolais Nouveau started to become a thing. So prior to that, Beaujolais Nouveau wasn't really anything other than just this early wine that people would drink on St. Martin's Day that was made by the winemakers and shared with all the friends in the village. And then this chap, George Duboeuf, who you've probably heard of.
Well, it's the easiest producer to find around in this moment, but yes.
So George Duboeuf, often referred to as the Pope of Beaujolais. In 1956, he spotted this opportunity to take this wine that they were drinking, that they were making on St. Martin's Day, and to actually market it, and to market it as this special thing called Beaujolais Nouveau. So he went around the bistros of Lyon, and he started to sell his Beaujolais Nouveau. So thanks to George Duboeuf, that's where Beaujolais Nouveau came about. And at this point, it came out some point in November around St. Martin's Day Festival, 11th, but there was no strict rules about it. Following on from that, two people in the 70s. So Joseph Berkman, who you may be aware of, Berkman Wines.
Was that from the Berkman wine? I was going to say for the wine merchants.
So Joseph, and he was also a columnist in the Sunday Times, and he sat down in Paris to have a dinner with Clement Freud, who was a columnist for The Sun and an MP and used to be on the radio and so on and so forth. In 1970, they sat down and they saw this hullabaloo about this new wine because they would, by this point, it sort of spread through Lyon and now it had moved to Paris, and they'd race to get the wines from Beaujolais to Paris and get them into the restaurants, the finest restaurants in Paris, where they would then serve them in November as this new wine. And so Clement Freud and Joseph Berkman basically had a private challenge amongst themselves to get this wine back to England in the fastest possible time. And so over the next couple of years, they would race, just the two of them would race from Paris. They'd collect their Nouveau wine and they'd race back to London and they'd see who could get back first. So on the Sunday Times, there's a writer called Alan Hall. So he was a colleague of Joseph Berkman. And then in 1973, Alan basically threw down the gauntlet to all of his readers to bring back the Beaujolais. And it was this challenge to get the Beaujolais from the Beaujolais vineyards back to his desk at the Times in London. And the first person to get the Nouveau wine back to him would win a case of champagne.
I have not heard of this at all. This is not the story I thought you were going to tell. This is impressive. Okay.
And this is where the whole sort of excitement around Beaujolais Nouveau and the race, if you've heard of the Beaujolais Run or the Beaujolais Race, people racing back in cars and trains and jet planes and everything else to get the Beaujolais back. This is where it all came from this challenge set by Alan Hall in 1973. Then over the 70s, 80s, 90s, it became more and more popular. And in 1985, the French government then actually created the law which sets Beaujolais Nouveau Day as the third Thursday in November. So now you're not allowed to buy Beaujolais Nouveau before 1 minute past midnight on the third Thursday in November. And that's a French law. When we collect our Beaujolais Nouveau wine, we have to sign a waiver to say, we're not going to do that. We're not going to sell it before then. I actually have, you can't see me, he's off camera at the moment, but there is a member of the gendarmerie just stood here in case I open a bottle, early, and he will then arrest me.
Oh, no, I thought that they cut your head off.
Oh, yeah, the guillotine. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they cut your head off, yeah.
Okay.
And so 1985, they made the rule that was Beaujolais Nouveau Day was set as the third Thursday in November, and that's where it still is now. And it reached its peak, it reached its zenith in 1992, at which point 50% of the production of Beaujolais of the whole region was actually given over to Beaujolais Nouveau.
No, really?
50% of the entire region by 1992 was Beaujolais Nouveau. Now,
oh my gosh, what is it now?
Getting ahead of yourself.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll keep quiet. Carry on, Dan.
The problem that created, so the problem that having 50% of your production created was one of quality then, quantity versus quality. Listeners of a certain age, who have these memories of Beaujolais breakfasts in the 1980s, of the race happening, of parties going on, may have somewhere in their mind the fact that, actually it was a bit naff, because sort of as the quantity increased and the quality decreased, it did become a bit naff, and it sort of fell out of favour a little bit. And actually, it's quite sad, because in the noughties there were a series of suicides in and around the region of Beaujolais because people had invested so much in Nouveau, because it was this trend that was growing and growing and growing, and then the bottom sort of fell out of it as the quality reduced, and then people lost everything. Winemakers lost everything. Some of them.
This is so sad.
It is, yeah.
God, all right. Way to bring us all down, Dan. This is supposed to be a fun podcast. All right. Hopefully you can bring it back up.
The bottom fell out of it. It was a bit naff. It was a bit rubbish. People stopped buying it. But what that did then was actually allow people to focus a little bit more on the other things that Beaujolais is known about, which we'll come on to later, which is the crus, the serious wines. But equally, probably in the last 10 years, there's been a real sort of focus back onto quality, both for the Crus, but also for Nouveau. And what we've seen is this series of successively good vintages that have happened sort of 18, 20, 22 have all been very good, very warm, very ripe years, and it's produced this incredible quality. And so the quality of Nouveau since about 2010 has been increasing again. And also, I think people have started to rediscover it. You know, those people that drank it in the 80s and 90s and then went off it a little bit are coming back to it going, oh, this is better than I remembered. And then you've got a whole new generation coming through who never heard of it before, who are discovering it and going, oh, yeah, we'll have some of this, you know. And it's a great opportunity to celebrate the harvest. It's the first chance we get to taste this harvest. You know, it's our first chance to taste what 2023 will be like as a year. And so it creates this real moment, you know, this of where we can go, right, yeah, let's taste 2023. What's it like? Oh, yeah, this is going to be a good year.
I have got, as you have, I believe, as well. So this is Domaine Belle Avenir. So this is the wine that's available on your site, which also the name of this wine is Cécile Dardenelli. Yeah? Is that the name of the wine?
Cécile Dardenelli, yeah. So fourth generation winemaker. So she's based in the village of Chapelle-le-Guinchy, which is, if I explain very quickly the geography of Beaujolais, so the Crus all tend to be in the north. Villages sort of tend to be in the middle, so Beaujolais Village, and then AOC Beaujolais tends to be in the south. So it sort of goes from being quite hilly in the north to being quite flat river plains in the south. And Chapelle-le-Guinchy sits sort of just between where the Crus and the villages sort of cross over. So she's very close to Juliana as the Cru is the closest.
Okay. And everyone, we will talk in far more detail about what Juliana and the other Crus give to your wine. So wait for part 2. But actually, that's quite nice because when you get Beaujolais Nouveau, it could just be from the typical south of Beaujolais, somewhere in Beaujolais, couldn't it? This happens to be Beaujolais Village. So we are in better soil territory, slight better terroir. So you're going to get a bit more concentration as well, even though this is a really fun, fruity style. You know, we are not after anything complex here, are we?
And it's, you can make, you know, they can make Beaujolais Nouveau anywhere within the appellation. Obviously here, as you mentioned, so it is labelled on the bottle Village because it is AOC Beaujolais Village, albeit a Nouveau version. So yeah, when you're buying, if you go into a shop, if you look, you can see, you know, if it just says Beaujolais, then that's just AOC Beaujolais, which is the very broad area. If it says Beaujolais Village, then it's coming from this slightly better terroir, this slightly better ground. So will be, you know, potentially a little bit more expensive, but in my opinion, worth paying the extra price for.
Well, how much is this a bottle?
So £12.60 on a mix 6 deal.
And everyone should be doing mix 6, let's be honest. Obviously drink responsibly, but what's the point?
Yeah. And there's probably some benefits for the environment, aren't there, in doing less shipping and stuff like that.
I love how you're saying that as a way to encourage people to buy 6 bottles, but actually that is genuinely true.
Yes,
it is, isn't it? You are going to drink 6 wines in your lifetime, so just buy the 6. At one point. Right, okay, let's get back to this wine. For me, it's like taking a whole load of strawberries that have just got like a punnet of strawberries that have been squished up, though. You know when you've like put way too much stuff in your picnic bag or whatever and it's all just gone everywhere. It's got that real huge bouquet smell of that, but also some kind of cassis blackcurrant, which I was quite surprised about. Because tell me.
I was going to say, I think there's a depth to it that you maybe don't expect. You know, if you remember Beaujolais Nouveau from the old days and you haven't had it for a while, I think your memory of it is much lighter than it actually is now, because you get this ripeness, you get this concentration. So yeah, you get those wild strawberries, you know, you get those really fun red fruits at the front, but then there is that concentration and depth, which is, you know, black currants, blackberries, maybe somewhere in there.
Yeah, no, do you know what? It's bright, it's smooth, it's really lively, it's not complex. But what I really like as well, Beaujolais Nouveau tends to have like no tannins. It's so smooth and chill it down. It's great. But even this wine has a tickle. It has a tickle. It has a tickle of tannin. No, but you know, it's like it's a suggestion. It's like
I'm going on the website later to update my tasting note, and I'm going to put this just has a little tickle of tannin.
It's a tickle of tannin. It's like, when you have apricot or a peach and that slight furriness that's just, but it's lovely and ripe. So it's a tickle. It's a tickle of tannin.
I love it.
That's what you're left with, right? So I like it. Like, it isn't complicated, but this is a adult Ribena with style and finesse. That is what this is.
Yeah, I think with any of the Nouveau wines, they are about fun. We don't want to intellectualize it too much. We don't want to be too, with our tasting note. And I mentioned earlier Sharpham New Release, which is like the English Nouveau version. And Duncan, who's the winemaker there, when I asked him, so it's 25 years they've been making New Release now. And I asked Duncan, about the whole process of how they find it. And he said, after the harvest, we have all of the grapes in the vats fermenting. He said, and then a couple of weeks before we need to bottle, I go round and I taste every tank. And when I find the tank and I think I could drink a bucket of that, that's the one that I'm bottling as New Release.
I love it. It makes sense. Do you know what? It's like this wine and the good versions of Beaujolais Nouveau. It's just grape juice HD. That's what it is. Because when you're in a winery and everything's fermenting and getting towards the end, that absolute intense smell of just primary fruits. This is what you have here. This is a young wine.
Yeah.
And we should talk about how it's made as well, because, actually, before we talk about how it's made, which helps with the idea of no tannins or tickle of tannins, but actually, let's talk about the grape for a second, because in terms of making red Beaujolais, it's one grape variety, Gamay. So what is Gamay? How would you describe it to people?
To give it its full name. I mean, I know we're saying we're being fun and we're being simple and we're not being... Yeah, we're going to be a bit pretentious now for a moment. We're going to be pretentious. Okay. It's actually called Gamay Noir à jus blanc.
I thought you were going to say Gamay Noir. I was very comfortable with the fact that officially it should be Gamay Noir. What the hell? Can you say this slowly? What?
Yeah, so Gamay Noir à jus blanc is its full title.
So the Blanc part. Oh, with white juice?
Yes.
Inside?
And it is a grape variety. So it's got Pinot Noir on one side and Gouais Blanc on the other side. So everyone will know Pinot Noir, very, very well-known grape. Gouais Blanc, incredibly promiscuous, doesn't really grow very much anymore, but has produced so many children. Do you know another famous grape whose parents are Pinot Noir and Gouais Blanc?
Isn't it Chardonnay?
It is Chardonnay. Yes. So the other grape that you're allowed to grow in Beaujolais, Chardonnay, is also made from the same two parents, which I think is pretty crazy. The fact that, on one side you've got a red grape and on the other side you've got a white grape, but yet the parents are the same.
But then that just goes to show, isn't it? When you have these natural crossings that have happened over time, it's weird. I always say as well, when you look at mutations of Pinot Noir, that's how we got Pinot Gris and Pinot Blanc and all these other things. And you're just like, how? But it's quite exciting actually to kind of go back in history just a little bit and see what's happened. See, everybody, I told you, he bloody well knows stuff. He's rather interesting, honestly. Oh, dear me. Yes. Right. So, yes, Gamay. Oh, no, sorry. Gamay Noir. Carry on. So Blanc.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, spot on. Yeah. So discovered round about 1380, 1385, sometime around there. No one's quite sure. It just popped up in some vineyards in Burgundy. And actually it comes, they reckon it was found in the village of Saint-Aubin-sur-Gamay, which is in Burgundy. And at the time, Philip the Bold, the Duke of Burgundy, was putting a lot of effort into diplomacy using wine. He was sending his very good quality red Pinot Noir wines all around Europe to build up, his sort of diplomacy, his position in the continent. And he discovered his farmers were actually really struggling. And his farmers were struggling because Pinot Noir is an absolute rotter. Like, it is a real difficult grape to grow. I think you've said it before. It's like the girl in the nursery rhyme. When she's good, she's very, very good. And when she's bad, she's rotten. It is a real pig to work with. And this new variety, this Gamay popped up in these vineyards in Burgundy, and it was a dream. It was so easy to work with. It produced high yields. It wasn't fickle. It just got on with the job and did it. And so the winemakers of Burgundy all started to sneak Gamay into their vineyards because it was a hell of a lot easier than making Pinot Noir. But Philip the Bald, the Duke of Burgundy, discovered this and got very, very upset and laid down a decree in 1935, in 1395, saying you must rip up all the disloyal Gamay. He said it must all go. So that everything got ripped up. He didn't care about what happened in Beaujolais because Beaujolais to him, he was the Duke of Burgundy. He wasn't the Duke of Beaujolais. It was a backwater. They were only good for making table wines. And so Gamay found its sort of natural home in Beaujolais. And one of the wonderful things about that was the fact that most of Beaujolais sits on granite. And granite and Gamay are like perfect bedfellows. It just helps Gamay. First, it tames its vigor a little bit, so it stops it being quite so vigorous and overproducing. But it also, that when it takes up, some of those, the sense of that place of the granite, it just gives it more. It gives it more depth, more body, more structure. And so it found the perfect place in Beaujolais. And so that's why, sort of throughout Beaujolais, you have pretty much all the vineyards are planted with Gamay. There's two grapes that are allowed. We mentioned Chardonnay earlier. So Gamay for red, Chardonnay for white, but only about 2% of the overall vineyard area of Beaujolais is planted to Chardonnay. The rest of it is Gamay.
Which is really bloody good. I know this episode we're going to focus on Gamay, but actually Beaujolais Blanc is a best kept secret of the wine industry.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Such good value.
It's amazing value. If you think about the geography, I talked a little bit earlier about the geography of Beaujolais. Beaujolais is just very slightly south of Burgundy. Actually, in the northern parts of Beaujolais, you can grow grapes under Burgundy classifications because because there is this sort of crossover. So if you think about that, if you buy wine that's labelled Beaujolais Blanc, which is 100% Chardonnay, you could buy Macon Chardonnay from only a few miles away, possibly even the same villages in some instances, but you'll pay a lot more because it says Burgundy on the label.
Yeah, I mean, so Macon is right. Obviously, Burgundy is north of Beaujolais, just in case anyone hasn't realised. Macon is the last part of Burgundy. And actually, when you look at Macon, it's not just north of Beaujolais. It even wraps around. That first section goes even to the east.
It's like intertwined, isn't it? It's like
absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so and so you can find some amazing value if you're happy to have Beaujolais on the label, which I always am, and everyone should be.
They should. But anyway, Chardonnay. You can have another episode another day. Back to Gamay. I love it. So yes, and actually, you've mentioned the granite soils. We've mentioned Gamay. When I was learning about this region, I remembered the 3 Gs. So when I was learning my WSETs, you had Gamay, you had granite, and you had goblet. And goblet being one of the other words for bush vines. And so that always really helped me, the 3 Gs. And that's something as well that this region is famous for. Obviously, things change as well now, but
I don't know in terms of the listenership, sort of how familiar people are with vineyards. But when people think of a vineyard, a lot of people that I speak to think of a field in England, basically, bounded by a fence or a hedge with vines growing in it on trellises, where you've probably got two rows growing on wires, slightly up a hill. And everything in that field will be owned by the farmer, the winemaker, whoever. And that is what a lot of people that I speak to have in their head as being a vineyard. We're not talking that here. Beaujolais it doesn't look like that at all. A bit like Burgundy. What you have are these sort of just swathes of vines. They're goblet trained, so they're low. They look a bit like, if there was no leaves on them, they'd look a little bit like a goblet in shape. There's no fences, there's no hedgerows, and what you have is a very small plot that belongs to one winemaker, and then a little sort of dirt path, and then another plot the same size. And we're talking about, maybe 100 meters by 100 meters as each plot. And that belongs to another winemaker, and then another plot next to it. And you'll have, maybe 100 plots in one area, and each one of those 100 plots, 3 of those might be owned by one maker, one winemaker, and they won't be next to each other. There'll be one in one corner, one in another corner, one somewhere else. There's no signs to tell you who owns any of these. They just know from hundreds of years of owning them, of knowledge.
That's crazy, yeah.
It is, when you go and you see it, like, first of all, you see that and you think, how do people know which is there? How do they know which of their vines? But they do. And then you look at these goblets and go, how on earth do they pick the vines? I mean, they must be midgets, otherwise they'll all have bad backs because they are so low to the ground. And then you go to, we'll talk a bit more about this later on, but you go to some of the cru vineyards and they're on these, incredibly steep slopes, 30-degree inclines or 30% inclines, which are, and oh my God, this is hard, back-breaking work. But yeah, but that's how they grow the Gamay in these sort of low goblet.
But if I'm correct, in some of the other parts of Beaujolais, like in the further south where they're not in the villages, actually now they are turning to doing trellising and being a little bit more modern, aren't they?
Of course. If you go to AOC Beaujolais, which is the lowest classification in the system, then yes, there will be mechanization, there will be, much more efficient vineyard systems.
But then equally, that's when you get much more of the kind of the clay marl soils. You don't get that wonderful granite and even the schist. So the 3Gs, the best wines, it's Gamay, granite, goblet. Yeah, anyway, so that it worked for me. Okay, so Gamay, it's it's got those lovely red fruits. It is a light wine. It doesn't have so many tannins in general. But specifically going back to Beaujolais Nouveau, they have a winemaking technique called carbonic maceration, don't they? And that is what really helps the wine become super smooth, super fruity. So I feel like you're going to be the man that's going to explain this to us.
So if you go into a winery in Beaujolais, first thing you'll notice is concrete tanks. So concrete tanks are the typical way of making wine in Beaujolais. So they're big.
So not stainless steel?
Not really, no. So what you see traditionally are concrete tanks, big, square concrete tanks. And, in harvest, they'll come and everything will go into the concrete tank. Whole bunches, including stems, everything will go in. And what happens is the first lot, sort of falls into the bottom. And as more of the grapes fall on top of those, the weight of that starts to crush the grapes at the bottom. So that is a traditional yeast-based fermentation that starts to happen just naturally, just from the weight of everything that's, the whole weight of everything pressing down on those grapes that first went in. As they start to ferment, they release CO2. And the CO2 rises up the tank and fills the tank. And as it fills the tank and basically removes all the oxygen, you then end up with an anaerobic process happening in the bunches at the top. So you increase the amount of lactic acid that goes into the top of the grapes. And what they then start to do is they actually start to ferment from the inside of the grape out. So they then start to burst and release their juice in that way. They start to, but in doing so, and this is the carbonic or the semi-carbonic maceration, in doing that, what you end up is with much brighter fruit flavors and much lower tannins. So you still get the color from the skins, you still get the flavors, but you don't get the tannins. So it makes for this much lighter, much more approachable style of wine. And it can, in some instances, and it partly depends on how you're doing it, you can, this is where also things like the sort of bubblegum notes that you get can come from, if you're familiar with that from Beaujolais. Or sometimes you pick up bananas, which some people think is a negative thing if you get the banana flavor, but again, that's because of the carbonic maceration that you're getting those.
But it's a really cool fermentation process. It's famous in this region, even more famous for the Nouveau, but it is used around the world. I mean, even young Riojas use this technique. It's a really cool type of fermentation process. Carbonic maceration. It's quite cool to understand it.
We've actually got one. We've actually got a pinotage from South Africa that's made with carbonic maceration. So you can use it for anything. And again, because pinotage can be incredibly tannic, as a wine. And actually, what's been produced in that instance is a wine that's really nice chilled, a red pinotage that's really nice. And you mentioned about sort of Hove and Rioja. Again, if you're using carbonic maceration there, these are wines that actually then work quite nicely chilled because you don't have the tannin in them. And so if you have them, I wouldn't, not very, very chilled, but if you were to have them at, say, 10, 11 degrees, something like that, then you end up with a really, nice wine to drink on a slightly warmer day, a little bit cooler. Delicious.
So would you say that this Beaujolais Nouveau is pretty good around the 10, 11 degrees if somebody wants to have a really fresh, fruity style?
Yeah, I would normally chill Beaujolais Nouveau very, very slightly. Maybe pop it in the fridge for 30 minutes before you open it, just to give it a little bit of a chill. And I think it's better for that. It's very refreshing then.
Would you ever age a Beaujolais Nouveau? Because it doesn't have tannins. Tannins is one of the natural preservatives in wine. That is what helps a wine age as well. So my answer would always be buy it, drink it, done. But you are a merchant. You will have got other bottles lying around probably from previous years that you may have been able to try.
So
any positives of holding back?
So a couple of weeks ago, I was doing an event, a consumer event.
Yeah.
I was presenting wines to the general public pre-Beaujolais Nouveau Day. And so I wanted to make a pitch for people to buy Beaujolais Nouveau. So I took a few bottles of last year's Beaujolais Nouveau with me just to use as a prop, basically. Yeah, just to go, oh, look, isn't this nice? Would you like this year's? It's very exciting. And I sold a dozen bottles because people actually enjoyed it because it's still drinking perfectly well. I wouldn't want to keep it a long time, but certainly, 12 to 18 months, it's going to be drinkable. I think in the 90s, when the quality was low, you wouldn't have wanted to keep it past January. It wasn't improving. Whereas now, because there is more of a focus on quality, actually, and there is a tickle of tannin, then you can keep it. And I always find it quite an interesting thing to compare. So we're doing a tasting with our customers for Beaujolais Nouveau Day, in which we've actually sent them a bottle of last year's Nouveau to taste alongside this year's Nouveau, so they can see how it develops. And it'll depend on the year. It'll depend on what the resulting wine is as to how long it will keep, as it always does.
I love that. And what would you pair this wine with? Like for me, again, I love a bit of piggies in a blanket with Beaujolais Nouveau. Why is that funny? Why is that funny?
Piggies
in a blanket. Love it. Oh.
I suppose it's almost Christmas, isn't it? I hadn't even thought about pigs in blanket. It's much too early to consider what I'm going to be eating for Christmas Day.
No, it is not. No, it is not.
So Katie, my wife, loves cheese wrapped in bacon on Christmas Day.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that could work. I think I prefer, but this is a wine I think that goes really well with gammon. It goes well with ham. It goes well with pork. I don't know. And again,
the classic is always coq au vin. Coq au vin is the classic combination to have with Beaujolais Nouveau, and then pears poached in Beaujolais Nouveau is the dessert to have. So if you were in the region, for Beaujolais Nouveau or around Beaujolais Nouveau, you're going to be served pears poached in Beaujolais Nouveau at some point.
Love that.
Because that is what they always do. Cold cuts on Boxing Day is another really good pairing with it.
And that's yes. Well, I was just going to say Thanksgiving in America, we don't do Thanksgiving, but for those people who do Thanksgiving, or, again, with all the meats and all the trimmings and all that kind of stuff, and just the same way what we might do as well with Boxing Day, all those those meats and stuff, I think work very nicely.
Yeah. So if you've just got lots of leftovers on Boxing Day and you're having a bit of a cold turkey, a bit of cold ham, a few bits of, leftover
piggies in a blanket.
Then that would be a good time to crack open a Beaujolais Nouveau.
Ugh, love it.
Equally, I think because it's a fun wine, you don't have to be too serious with it. You don't have to think too hard about it. You just crack open a bottle, have it on the safe whilst listening to this podcast.
I think that's a fabulous idea. Now, I think that you have definitely inspired a few people to probably be interested in this region as a whole. You have been to Beaujolais how many times? A few?
Yeah, a few times. Yeah.
Regularly. So if somebody wanted to go and visit, because, we talk about, yes, okay, Burgundy is in the north, but Lyon is just to the south. Isn't Lyon, and again, I've never been, this is a place amazing for food, right?
Yes, yeah. It's so well known for the food that you get to the bistros of Lyon. This is, and as I said earlier, like in 1956, this is where Georges Duboeuf started with the Beaujolais Nouveau. To the bistros of Lyon, and so you can go there. You would have your Beaujolais Nouveau with the food of the region, and like the whole of France. I mean, the food wherever you go in France, I think is wonderful. And it's always an event, isn't it? I know. I just said you could just sit on the sofa and open a bottle of it. In France, no one would ever do that. No. Like, no one ever just opens a bottle of wine on the sofa. There's always food to go with it, even if that's just a little bit of saucisson, and some cheese.
Oh, yum. Yeah.
There's always food. There's always nibbles to go with the wine. But yes, flying into Lyon is the way to go.
That's the way to go. Okay.
So you could fly into Lyon and then easily explore the region. Now you are in the south of the region in Lyon, and you really want to get up to the north to go to see because the Crus are the place that you really want to see. That said, the Pieds d'Oreille, which translates as the Golden Stones, which is further south, and that's part of the village, the Beaujolais village region. Beautiful. If you like Tuscany, it's like being in Tuscany, because you've got all these wonderful golden stone buildings, all made out of, I guess, some kind of sandstone. I should know this, shouldn't I? But all the buildings are so pretty, and the little sort of windy roads going through villages with, old churches and town halls, and it's really very, very pretty. If you want to learn more about it, there's a book called Cloche-Merle, which is set in this region, and it was made into a BBC drama in the 70s and 80s. It's good, and that's all set in that area.
Oh, interesting. So if you could ever find the BBC drama, I don't know whether maybe it's on the internet.
Probably on YouTube.
It might be. Would they? Have you seen it, by the way? Have you seen the drama?
Yes, I've seen clips of the drama. It is older than me.
Did they record it in Beaujolais?
They did. Yes, yeah, in the village of Cloche-Merle. Yeah, so you can get a sense of it, but you can buy the book. You can buy an English translation of it. It's quite an interesting book. Basically, it's the story of a urinal being built in a village, which the village don't want.
Okay, right. I mean,
it's sort of a satire on French bureaucracy, which we all love. we always love to look at the French bureaucracy and laugh at them.
Oh dear. Okay, all right. Well, there you go, everybody. A suggestion for whilst you're drinking your bottle of Beaujolais Nouveau, you can open up this book and snuggle up on the couch and get really into things. So if you flew into Lyon, and like you said, and people do want to go up to the Crus, how long? Because to be honest, this is not a very big area, isn't it? Like 34 miles, like the whole of Beaujolais.
Yeah, 55 kilometres from top to bottom, and about 15 kilometres from east to west. So north to south, 55 kilometres, 15 kilometres east to west. So not a very big area. So you're talking about maybe an hour and a half to get, from one end to the other.
Perfect. And then in terms of is it quite, you said about winding roads though, but is it quite easy to drive around this area?
You see, yeah, it's easy to drive around, but it is small villages, slightly hilly, sort of hills tucked into valleys and on hills. So it is windy roads. And like I say, it reminds me a lot of, say, Tuscany or even Piemonte. They're very similar sorts of areas, I find, both, in the style of the wines that they make, actually, in a lot of ways, but also in the geography and the layout. But then they're also very close, actually, if you look at where they are. So it's not surprising.
How many days would you recommend as a good amount of time to kind of just get yourself around this area and enjoy it? Just a long weekend is good enough?
A long weekend you'd be okay. But then if you want to spend time in Lyon, you probably want a bit long, because you probably want a couple of days in Lyon just to explore the city, and then a few days to actually go and have a drive around and visit a few vineyards. One of the great things you have, actually, so in a lot of the villages, you have caveaux. So, for example, where the Crus are, so Caveau Morgon. And so in the centre of Villy-Morgon, you have this building, and then downstairs you have Caveau Morgon. And in there, they have basically all of the wines that are made in Morgon. So you can go into there and you can buy like a glass of any of the wines that are made in the area, and you can taste them. So you can buy like a flight of, say, 6 wines, and you say, right, I want to try these 6 producers from Morgon. They only have Morgon in Caveau Morgon. They only have, say, Fleury in Caveau Fleury. But you can go in and you can try them all. So it's a really great way of sort of getting familiar with that Cru village.
Oh, fantastic. Without having to dedicate several hours to do one tour or one visit to one winery.
Yeah, and then you might go there and you might say, right, actually, I really love this one. I want to now go and visit the winery, I want to go and see the vineyard. But it gives you that opportunity to sort of get a real sense of understanding of the crew and the style and the way that the wines are made.
Now, is Beaujolais a bit of a still kind of just, you said villages, and we know there's vines there. Is there any other activities going on, or is it really sleepy, chilled, go for nice walks, drink nice wine and eat good food? Is that the vibe of Beaujolais?
That is the vibe. To me, I mean, other people listening, I may have been and done something really crazy in Beaujolais. I've never seen anything like that. So normally it is you go, you taste wine, you eat amazing food, you chat to wonderful people, go for long walks on the hills, beautiful.
So we'll be back next week, continuing with Beaujolais, but focusing on the 10 crus. So the top 10 villages, the villages that produce the best quality. And don't forget, you're in safe hands with Wickhams Wines, especially when in Beaujolais, as they won the Best Specialist Retailer South and Regional France with the Decanter Retail Awards this year. So don't forget to use my code EATSLEEP10 to get yourself 10% off your next order. And as Beaujolais Nouveau is quite an easy wine to drink, here is a quote for you. And it is, I'm not having a glass of wine, I'm having 6. It's called a tasting and it's classy. So keep that in mind when you open up your next bottle of Beaujolais. So that's it for today. Share the podcast, rate the podcast, leave a review. And until next week, wine friends, cheers to you.